Hi, I'm Zach, and this is my show where I answer whatever questions people give me. This week's question, 3 words long. ManScaping or ManSpreading? It took me a while to figure out how clever this question was. So I have to basically define ManScaping and ManSpreading for people who don't know so that you can understand what the cleverness is. ManScaping is the grooming of hair on a man. You know, this is a pretty new term, and the idea is that men need to pay attention to their bodies in the same way that women typically do. I think women have probably always paid more attention to their bodies overall, and it might just be natural, or it could be cultural, or both. But manscaping is kind of like, you know, men shaving their pubic hair, and the idea is, you know, creating themselves as more pleasing or something. So manspreading is also a relatively new term that describes basically taking up too much room on the subway or the public transit, and it's a criticism of the way that, you know, men position their legs. I would say this is only a problem when there's like actually too little space at that moment on the train. Like, I think men naturally would like to just be more comfortable, but, you know, if it actually is preventing other people from being comfortable, then, you know, you get the whole idea that it's like a real problem. Today's question is manscaping or manspreading. Now, this is to some extent a false dichotomy because you could choose both or neither. But insofar as it's like a serious question, then I suppose what it's saying is it either my personal preference or the obligation of men in general to pay more attention in grooming their bodies, and thus being more sensitive to how they are coming across to, or on the other hand, is society demanding too much of men and asking them to pay too much attention to things that are just natural habits that aren't hurting anybody? What the question's really asking is manscaping or manspreading. I think it's good that this question poses manspreading as a positive, as like a thing that you would do, as opposed to setting it up as a thing that is always to be rejected. So there's a blog that I found called yourballsarenothatbig.tumblr.com, and this is like a feminist. It is a rage blog against dudes on the New York City subway. And some of the pictures are with men spreading their legs wide, and the complaint is they're taking up too much room. But there's other pictures where the man isn't, in my judgment, taking up any more room than he ought to take up. I mean, on the one hand, there's a legitimate complaint about men who consciously or unconsciously spread their legs too wide. But on the other hand, there's kind of, you get the feeling that there's a gleeful element of kicking men in the balls, of misandry. Some of the pictures of manspreading, the men themselves are so big that the fact that they take up room is related to the fact that they take up room. I mean, if you hate the fact that men are big, you just hate men for being men. So, on the one hand, you have the issue of subway politeness, and on the other hand, there's a kind of gleeful feminist permission-taking that you're allowed to hate men for taking up space. That seems to be like the other side of the coin when it comes to the anti-manspreading campaign. So what do I think? Manscaping or manspreading? Well, I think that, you know, manscaping is good. I'm not like a sex worker. I'm not a male stripper. I don't need to be fully manscaped at all times. So I think manscaping is good in moderation because it's nice to be pleasing to people. So that's my manscaping attitude. My ManSpreading attitude is basically that it's not a big deal. Your balls actually are bigger than she thinks they are, and maybe you do need to take up that space. But don't be an asshole. Just be a dick. Okay, that's it for this week's episode. Join in next week. For the first time in the history of the channel, I'm going to ask myself a question.